Hey, welcome to the channel. My name is Jason, and it is time for our first read along together. Yes, with the book, The Wide Carnivorous Sky and Other Monstrous Geographies by John Langan. I was really excited for this pick because I love horror, I love speculative fiction, I love science fiction, and it seems to encapsulate a lot of those genres. So we are going to cover the first two stories today. Kids and How the Day Runs Down. Because I've never done one of these and because I haven't really watched many other booktubers do them, it's going to be kind of free form. It's going to be kind of chaotic, unorderly, unscripted, but I will try to edit the gaps out. And then again, as always, give me feedback in the comments, or better yet, come to the Discord. You can talk to me directly there, as well as discuss this book and what we talk about today with all of the other people, but I also welcome a discussion in the comments as well. All right, here we are at the table of contents. Now, I was chatting with some people on Discord, and I always read introductions. I know a lot of people don't like them, prefaces, introductions, afterwards even, acknowledgments. I love reading all of it because it tends to give me a behind-the-scenes look, a behind-the-curtain peek at what maybe the author intended or maybe what inspired the work. And I'm very glad I read this introduction because when I first started flipping through the book, I noticed that the second story, How the Day Runs Down. See, I'm already screwing it up. It was written in a play format or a script format, and I thought that was interesting. So I went back, started the introduction, and indeed, it makes sense. How the Day Runs Down. So I made little highlights here. This is what's great about Kindle. How the Day Runs Down is a zombie story that first appeared in the John Joseph Adams anthology. Anyway, The Living Dead is a good example. It is a zombie structured around Thornton Wilder's iconic play Our Town. Now, being the uncultured fool that I am, I didn't really know about it. It sounded familiar, it rung a bell, but I didn't know, so I looked into it. So Our Town is a 1938 meta-theatrical three-act play by Thornton Wilder. I won't get too in-depth with it because we're going to talk about that in the discussion, but just do yourself a favor, read the introduction if you haven't already, or visit the Wikipedia entry of Our Town because it's going to provide a lot more context to what the story is about. Oh, another note in the introduction was that John Langan writes very long short stories, and indeed they are, but that's okay. That allows us to consume these a little bit slowly, focus on, a few at a time or one at a time. So the first story is Kids. I love this first line. These were not his students. And really this story, you guys have read it hopefully. If you're watching this, if you have not read the story, you should stop now, watch my other video about what this is all about, and then read these two short stories and then come back and we can chat about it in the comments. So essentially the story was just basically a teacher and all of these kids show up. They're dirty, yeah, not to mention the smell they brought with them, the pungence of garbage bags heaped high on the sidewalks outside cheap restaurants. So that's a very specific and interesting description. And I think that's one thing I've noticed about reading John Langan is his descriptions are very colorful, very specific, and they really evoke imagery, which I appreciate. So I think if you are a storyteller, if you are a writer of any kind, and presumably some of you are if you're on my channel, he is a great guy to learn from. But anyway, yeah, these kids just kind of walk in. The expressions on their faces, those of small animals suddenly discovered by a predator. And this teacher's just like, oh, hey, are you guys okay? And the kids then proceed to eat him, like zombies do. They're zombie kids. And so the thing about this story is I wasn't quite sure how this was going to fit in with anything or if it was going to at all. And it does relate to the next story because the next story is about zombies, but not directly. So I was kind of curious what John Langan was trying to do here. Is he just kind of like whetting our appetites for what was to come? Or is there some kind of hidden thing that I didn't catch that relates it back to the main story? But if it did, if I missed something, because I am known for missing things, let me know in the comments below. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the gist of it. And, because I'm a writer, I'm a storyteller, I am going to talk about things that are specific to writing. And this is one thing I keep seeing in writing that it just blows my mind because you don't need it. So again, we have shouldn't have done that in italics. He thought you do not need that. So if you are a writer or just curious about the rules of writing, you do not need to say he thought. Italics emphasize thought. They indicate thought. That is exactly what they do. So Brandon Sanderson, all you guys out there, I see it in fantasy all the time. Please stop. It is kind of annoying to my eyes. But anyway, that's beside the point. The story was interesting. I feel like there was really no conclusion. It's just kind of like teacher, kid, zombie kids walk in. He addresses them. Hey, what's going on here? They basically attack him. You know, he tries to stand, but ow, the little punk bit me. Look at that. He bit right through the leg on my pants. It was true, brown fabric, etc., etc. And actually, like I said, John Langan, he is a great visual writer, and I highlighted this specifically for that. So, looking at their mouths smeared with red, you might have thought they were playing at clowns, applying their mother's lipstick with children's enthusiastic spasms. So I love that because when you think of a clown, you don't necessarily think of zombies, you don't think of blood, maybe unless you're afraid of clowns, in which case you might. But I thought this was a great contrast or counterpoint to the rest of the scene because this guy's being consumed by these little kids, and but he's looking at them in a way that it looks as if they were playing with their mother's makeup and smearing their faces to try to look like clowns. So an interesting one, and that's essentially the end of this story. No sound, he thought. There we go again. As consciousness spiraled down the drain pipe, and they weren't talking, laughing, crying, making any of the sounds a group of children might make. There was only the noise of eating, flesh tearing, teeth clicking, lips smacking together. So it was okay. I mean, I appreciate it for the visuals. John Langan's a great writer as well, so I think just it has a nice flow to it. A lot of nice imagery. It's just kind of like, you know, a scene, like a very, very small scene, a short scene where these kids walk into a classroom and eat their teacher. So I don't know, maybe it's the prelude to this thing. Maybe he was just trying to say, hey, you know, turn back now if this bothers you, because the next thing is going to be a little bit of a deeper dive into the zombies, which brings us to how the day runs down. So this one, as you know, was written in such a way as if it were a play. And the stage manager, same thing as in Our Town, the play this was modeled after. He is our host. It's really interesting because, you know, again, it's very meta, right? This stuff is happening on a stage, but it is a stage play. But it's like reality blending with this horrific narrative. But the visuals are great. I love how the stage manager comes in, and then I believe he sits down by a tree, if I remember. Yeah, so the bottom down, what is it here? The stage manager spares a moment for the gnarled shape behind the tombstones, a squat willow, before positioning the flashlight on the ground to his left, bottom down, so that its white light draws a cone in the air. He settles himself down beside it, his back leaning for and finding a tombstone, his legs gradually crossing in front of him. So that's cool. It's a very, again, John Langan, he evokes amazing imagery, and I think that's probably my favorite thing, I think, of his writing that I've experienced so far anyway. And so anyway, we move on with the story. All of the dialogue is done this way, where it's just, you know, a bolded name and then the copy without quotation marks or anything like that. I believe the first story, if I remember right, what note did I make here? Let's see. Oh yeah. So it was Owen. He sees the Pastor Parks. Please don't come any closer. And I think, oh yeah, now I remember why I highlighted this. I think it was because how to show action without narration. This was really cool. I'm always looking for different ways to create stories or like, you know, telegraph action or interior thought or whatever it may be. Just different than how you normally see it. And this is a great example, and I love this for how he's essentially, you can see the action unfolding before your eyes, but it's through dialogue, you know, which is a very interesting concept and something I think I'm going to have to dig into on my own work because I like the fact that it's non-standard, right? You get everything you need to without all of the narrative beats in the middle of the dialogue, which, you know, we're normally taught to do. Or it's Owen Treza, please, can you please stay where you are? I don't want to. You really need to stay there. We just need to make sure. Jesus, please, Owen. So I love this because you see this Pastor Parks just lurching over, the zombie guy lurching over to Owen. It's not described. It's all through the dialogue of this character, and it was just super engaging. I loved it a lot. Please, I don't want to have to pull this trigger, but if you don't stay where you are. So you can just imagine Owen pointing the gun, and I enjoyed that a lot. For Christ's sake, won't you stop? I have a child on the way. I don't want to have to shoot you. There's even some exposition in there, which is interesting. But that was Owen, and I think the next story, if I remember correctly, was about a brother and a sister. Yeah, here we go. So we have Jennifer and Jackson Holland. Stage right. A stage light pops on, throwing a dim yellow glow over one of the tombstones, and Jennifer and Jackson Holland. She's standing behind the headstone. He's sitting on the ground in front of it to its right. And that's what's interesting about this thing too, is that the stage manager is acting as the storyteller. So he's painting the picture for you. He's sitting by this tree, just kind of explaining everything that's going on. And even though it is expository, It's very interesting. It's just setting the stage. That is how you tell a story. You know, if you're sitting around a campfire in this case near a flashlight beneath an old willow. And so these two kids, I believe they're like 16, if I remember right. Anyway, I don't think it matters. I love the visual again. It's a very short, simple scene where we have these two characters just kind of hanging out around these tombstones. And they just have this discussion about, yeah, don't you think if great grandma Rose were going to return, she would have already? I mean, it's been like what, 10 days, 2 weeks since the last one dug themselves out. And it took them a while to do that. Right, which means there could be others who will need even longer. And then Ezra's talking about their grandpa coughing so hard, his teeth shot out on a mom's plate. They notice something on the ground. And so then Jackson ends up showing Jennifer where he's seen this, and she shoots into the ground. And then what does he say? She destroys the ground. Was it her? I think so. Something was right at the surface. Let's hope it wasn't a woodchuck. And then we leave these two kids. We should probably wait a couple more minutes just to be sure. Wonderful. And then we go back to the stage manager. So I think the most interesting vignette out of this entire short story was the one about Mary. This woman who sees this moving truck, her neighbors coming up to the house, and then imagining. It's almost like all the stuff's unfolding quickly, but everything is slowed down through perspective. And so she imagines, she has no idea, but this driver comes up and she imagines everything he's been through to get infected. And I love that aspect of it because, you know, we're always trying to project what could have happened if we witnessed something, or where someone came from, or how they went about whatever they did. And our imaginations run wild, and that's exactly what happened to Mary here. And that is my note. It is cool to have characters imagine a story. So it's, you know, it's a story within a story. And not only that, but that really speaks a lot to Mary as a character, how she imagines things, what she is actually imagining, and she has a very vivid imagination, let's say, where we see he's taking, the truck driver she's imagining is taking the tooth from his arm. Their extraction causes more bleeding. He drops the tweezers onto the floor next to the teeth and empties the remainder of the saline on his elbow. There are enough gauze pads left for him to wipe his elbow off and improvise a bandage using the roll of surgical tape. So yeah, we go back. And then another great part of the story, I think, too, was this part, right? So we get back to the present. So she imagines all of this stuff, what's going on. And then we get back to the present. That's right. The truck that came to a stop outside the house as I watched bubbles forming at the bottom of the pot water I was heating was full. It was packed with eaters. And what's great about that is it's essentially like tension in itself. We have this pot that is going to begin to bubble or begin to boil. And it's such a great image because you're sitting there in the kitchen with her. She's looking out this window. Her pot is getting ready to boil, and it's acting like suspense in itself. So here we go. So we're using this as like a ticking time bomb. The first bubbles had lifted themselves off the bottom of the pot and drifted up through the water to burst on the surface. So things are just amping up. And unfortunately, she finds her kids who have been eaten by these zombies who got into her house. And I love the way they show up. It sounded like a knock. When I rewind it and play it in my head again, it still sounds like a knock, no matter how I try to hear it otherwise. And it's funny because you don't really think about zombies knocking on the door, and that's exactly what she's coping with here. And here's this highlight. I realize how ridiculous it sounds, how unforgivably stupid, but it never occurred to any of us that the eaters might walk right up to our front doors and knock on them. Or, I don't know, maybe we were aware of the possibility, but assumed there was no way a single eater, let alone a truckload of them, could appear in the middle of the street without someone noticing. And I highlighted this because not only is he flagging something that is not typical in a zombie film, but also the fact that he's using a character, he's using writing on the page to acknowledge the fact that this is out of the ordinary. And I think that's a really easy way, if you are a writer, storyteller, to make sure that the reader doesn't scoff at your work, right? If you acknowledge it on the page, which he did here through a character, it's a great way of mitigating those kinds of problems. So yeah, she finds her children dead. And then this is what was great too. I highlighted this because the jarring writing, the way it was written. So she's replaying the 3 minutes it took for her life to disintegrate. I focus on me in the kitchen. I can't remember how I got there. What's more important is she keeps going between I and we. So she's constantly, as a mother would, correcting herself, stopping herself mid stream of thought, because she's thinking about her family. She's thinking about her kids. So you can see it right here. We, instead, I ran for the kitchen. I must have been searching for something to defend myself, us with. So you have an M dash, us with. And we learn Mary's fate, of course, when she runs out of the house and gets hit by the car. I just highlighted other things here, like an animal being vivisected. It just really stood out to me as kind of a very interesting, specific way to describe a sound. So they seem more like the shrieks of an animal being vivisected. And again, here we go. But I was wrong. I was they, to pluralize it. Oh, they had them in their teeth. And so that, yeah, that's the unfortunate scene when she discovers that her kids have been devoured. And again, more and more of correcting herself, talking about herself, and then, saying us, myself, us, I, we. And then this next part I noticed, I don't know if it was, but if any of you have seen the Evil Dead film series with Bruce Campbell, this kind of reminded me of that. So when we're talking about, this is the next one, where the stage manager is setting the stage, and he says, an idiot takes his arm off with his chainsaw trying to play hero. That really reminded me of, I think it was Evil Dead 2, if I remember correctly, the really zany one, when Ash takes his arm off with a chainsaw and then mounts the chainsaw to it. So if that was a callback, if not, I'm not quite sure, but that's what came to mind. And what's great here is, I made a note on this because a lot of times stories try to explain things in vivid detail, and John Langan does quite often, but this is when the stage manager is recounting the fate of the children. So a situation like this, though, like this poor woman and her children, those children, I know what she saw when she ran into that living room. I know what is on her shirt and how it got there. I don't have the faintest idea what I'm supposed to do with that knowledge. I could tell you, I suppose, but to what end? You know what those things, those eaters, that's not a bad word, is it? You know what they did to that little girl and that little boy. And he's right, exactly. Like, we've seen enough zombie films. We know exactly what's going to happen. And it almost makes it more powerful that he did not describe that scene. He's basically saying, yeah, I know what happened, but like, why would I tell you? You don't need to know. You know exactly what happened. And so I just made a little highlight for that because I thought that was kind of cool. The power of the unsaid, essentially. And so now we get he's explaining the psyche of the girl who hit her. So she has no idea. She can have no idea that deep within Mary's psyche, she's standing at the stove for the 10,000th time, watching a pot full of water begin to boil, waiting for her children to start screaming. And so I love that. That's such a beautiful ending because the torture is locked inside of Mary's head. She's destroyed from the car accident, but she's reliving that moment over and over and over, which is exactly what we read previously. So then the story ends where we have sort of a showdown with the town, and there's old Billy Joe who dies, and then we get a little scene of him walking off to heaven, I guess, but it is a dark hall. He even asks, is it supposed to be white? But no, he's like, that's something that your eyes do before you die or while you're dying. And I love this last thing. Yeah, Billy Joe asks him to, can I ask you one question? And he's like, I can try. He's like, we're fucked, aren't we? And so they're, talking about, is this the end of the world? And, the stage manager is talking about, there's always a chance. I realize how that sounds, but there's just enough truth left in it to make it worth saying. Things could turn around, etc., etc. As Billy Joe walks into the light, into the darkness, I should say, into the afterlife. And overall, I'm really enjoying the book so far. Kids, I felt, was just kind of a story to set the stage for what's to come, I suppose. It would have been cooler if it would have linked back into this one, and maybe it does. Maybe I just missed something here. But again, Mary's story was the huge highlight for me in this. So many great things about that one. But tell me, what did you think? Let me know in the comments below, or you can join my Discord, have a chat with me. We have a channel specifically for this one where we can go back and forth, and obviously there will be spoilers up until the stories we are reading. And so speaking of what is coming up next, well, for next Saturday, I believe, or Friday, depending on my schedule, I will release a video where we will be talking about the next tale in the Wide Carnivorous Sky and Other Monstrous Geographies, the story Technicolor. So I'm always looking for suggestions. If you have anything you'd like to see me do differently, let me know in the comments. Let me know I'm in Discord. Because as I said, this is the first time I've ever done this. I just kind of went off the cuff. I kind of winged it. And who knows, maybe this is better suited for a live stream. So if that's something you guys are into, a live stream, more than happy to do it. So it's more of a conversation. But anyway, let me know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments. Cool stuff I missed. Do you disagree with me on any of my observations, let's say? So looking forward to seeing you guys next week and talking about Technicolor. So I will see you then. Thanks for hanging out with me.